Hey guys, and welcome to the latest edition of the podcast, where today I'm delighted to have an international athlete from a sport that not many of us will be familiar with, but one we're going to find out a lot more about. So, Ste Gordon, welcome to the show.
Hey Chris, hope you're well. Thanks for having us on, man.
You're very welcome. So, Ste, for the listeners, pal, just want to tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into kettlebells.
Yeah, so I started my real sporting journey started with Thai boxing, and this was my first experience of kind of good quality coaching. So I was a typical lad who used to live for the weekend, go out with his mates and stuff like that. And then one of my work colleagues invited me to a Thai boxing club, and I kind of fell in love with it. And the guy there was just an incredible coach and mentor, and he helped me massively. And I still keep in touch with him. He's just had a massive impact on my life, and he showed me a way of living in martial arts and giving you that discipline and loving your body and everything else as well. But at the same time, that spurred my interest in getting back into coaching in terms of being a PT and a fitness coach. But ultimately, funnily enough, everybody wants coaching either early in the morning or late on an evening.
Yeah, there's never in the middle. They don't want us to go to bed early, and they don't want us to have a lie-in. It's not fair, is it?
That's it, mate. That's it. So it kind of kiboshed the Thai boxing because I wasn't able to make the sessions, and I really struggled in the gym in terms of I always want something to focus on, and I always wanted something to try and strive for, and then kettlebells started to pop up, and you'd seen them in the gym, and I thought, oh, this is a pretty cool tool. And I went and did a 2-day weekend course with, I think, the guys behind You Show Me Now. And the guy, Andy Phillips, absolutely fantastic coach, just opened my eyes to all things general fitness type training with kettlebells. And he dropped in that you can actually do kettlebells. Like, there was actually a sport which you just basically snatch and lift the kettlebells for 10 minutes. Wow. And I thought, that sounds pretty good, fairly straightforward. Went back home to my gym, practicing my techniques, and then realised 10 minutes is a long time.
So it is for kettlebells, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, mate. So it was just like, right, okay, this is really interesting. Why am I like gassing at 2 minutes? Like, what's going on here? My forearms are burning, my grip's ripping and stuff. And they had a level 2, and it was a guy called BJ Rules sort of took me through some of the kettlebell sport techniques, and he introduced me to a few names who were on the scene. Mark Stroud being one of them, who's still a big player in the country now, and he kind of took me under his wing and sort of just exposed me to what it meant to be a kettlebell sport athlete. So for those guys who don't really know what kettlebell sport is, basically it's 2 kettlebells, and you jerk them above your head for 10 minutes, as many reps as possible. You have to adhere to the certain judging standards, so the kettlebells have to be completely still above the head. You're not allowed to put them down. Your rest position is in rack, so when your elbows are touching your stomach, you're not allowed to drop them on the floor. And it's as many reps as you can in 10 minutes.
Oh, so great for your posture. So it's great for posture in that.
Yeah, I mean, it is when you can get your elbows to your hip crest, but when you first start, you realise, actually, my elbows are quite far away from here, so it's a lot gone through the shoulders. But I think that's what interested me about the sport at first, was like, right, okay, you just want to make the 10 minutes, so automatically you're dangling that carrot of, I want to smash through the 10 minutes. And just as I'd started, I must have got in it at the right time, because there was a few Russian coaches that came over, because it comes from Russia, this sport, and it was 2 high-level world-class coaches and athletes came over, and they delivered a workshop down in London. So I went down there, spent a weekend with these 2 incredible, crazy, obscene Russian athletes who lifting 232s look like a walk in the park. And for anybody who wants to check it out on YouTube, one of my after Mark Stroud, my first Russian coach was a guy called Sergei Rachinsky, and this guy, one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet, but when you put him into any sport and endeavor, he is just an absolute
bit of a beast, is he?
Just a monster, absolute monster. I mean, he holds the world record for the amount of back squats in an hour with 80 and 100 kilos. Did like 500 reps, you know, like it just. But so you can imagine being sat in a barbell back squat for 1 hour. He's just that kind of guy. But
his rotation must be absolutely killing him with being locked in at that angle, and he must have legs bigger than Ronnie Coleman. That is insane.
He's the same body weight as me, like 85 kilos. But what he did is he introduced me to this style of kind of being able to switch your mind off, and you're pushing your body to the absolute limit. And the thing is about becoming really good at kettlebell sport is you have to become a really good all-round athlete. Now, we hear that in all different sports, like a rugby player, a footballer, and track and field athletes and stuff. They're like all general all-round athletes.
Yeah.
And kettlebell sport's kind of no different, because you have to have a good base level of strength. You have to have good optimal mobility to be able to get into the key positions in second dip, overhead, and in jerk. And you have to have good mental toughness, because when you stood there, and I compete at what they call professional category, so that's 232 kilograms in each hand, and you stood there and you've got 3/4 of your body weight resting into your hip bone, and basically your body's going, after 2-3 minutes, okay, this was fun, you can stop now, you know. And you're like, no, we're going for the 10, we're going for the 10. And there's so many different things within your mind that are telling you to stop. The pain level just goes up and everything else like that. So the mental toughness to get to the 10 minutes is really, really key and important. But you have to have a good aerobic base. You have to be like a really good, just have a good engine on you, you know.
Yeah.
And also just bodily awareness. We can see some of the world-class top athletes in any sport around the world, just the way they can move their bodies and carry themselves and create shapes. Because of this awareness is incredible, and kettlebell sport's no different, because it's such a cyclical sport. The margin for error, you don't sometimes necessarily see it in the first rep, the second rep, or even the 10th, 20th rep, but you notice it when it gets to 50, for example, or if you notice it in the latter stages. And if you compare this to a 5K runner, a 10K runner, or a marathon runner, is an inefficient technique in the first part of a race only starts to become apparent in the latter parts of a race.
Yeah.
And that's the same as kettlebell sport. Now, the ultimate goal is being efficient and being able to maintain a certain amount of power output in a certain amount of time, in 10 minutes. And that's the traditional lifting. And so you've got the awareness in your body to have good body awareness and good skill acquisition. Then you've got to be strong, because you need to put the weight above your head. You need to have a really, really good, strong cardiovascular system and a good, like specific endurance to get you through the time scales. And you have to be mentally strong, because the brain always wants you to take the easy option, you know. Some days we find it hard to get off the couch. So can you imagine what the brain's shouting at you when you've got two weights there, you know, and your muscles are cramping and you've got sweat dripping out your face, and your mouth is really, really dry, and everything else like that, and your heart rate is at its absolute max within 2 minutes. So it's I'm not selling the sport as people that want to get involved, but for me, that's what got me hooked, man. You know, the becoming an all-round athlete and the pursuit of being better. That's what really got me hooked into the sport, you know.
That sounds good. I suppose in terms of the weight, obviously it's classed as a weightlifting sport, isn't it? And with it being with obviously the kettlebells being 32 kgs, this is where you're going to really identify whether you've got any muscular discrepancies on either side, I suppose, well, isn't it? So when it comes to actually programming in your training schedule for X period of weeks, I suppose it gives you a great incentive to identify what you need to work on, doesn't it, going forward?
Yeah, and I mean, the main thing is one thing you'll find is when people start off, and sometimes they go into kind of one kettlebell. When you start with one kettlebell, you can kind of overcompensate in certain areas. Everybody's kind of got a stronger side compared to a weaker side. So if you're using one kettlebell, overhead's a lot easier because you can sort of manipulate your body. You can get into rack a little bit easier because you can manipulate your hips and stuff like that. When you've got two kettlebells, it's a whole different ball game because you've got to have really good thoracic mobility to be able to get rested overhead. You've got to have good mobility around the pecs to allow the elbows to sit into the hip bone. So when you're looking at these little types of nuances, it's the same approach that I use when I'm working with endurance athletes, whether they be a runner. You know, what position is the most effective and the most efficient for you in your first few strides? We want to look at the end. And if you look at any of the studies from the elite 5K runners to the sub-elite, it's not their strength, it's not their endurance, it's not their power for a certain extent. It is basically their ability to maintain technique and efficiency and running economy for a lot longer. So when you're looking at the needs analysis of a kettlebell sport athlete, you're kind of looking at, right, okay, where do these sit? And it's very easy to go, mobility's the key, strength's the key, and all of this, but everybody's completely unique. You know, I've got guys who haven't got great mobility, but they can put up some really good reps. But it's knowing what type of athlete are they? Are they an elastic athlete or are they a strength athlete? And it all depends on their background. And when you're working with adults who come into kettlebell sport in a bit of a later life, then you've got to take that into consideration, just like you would in any sport. But with kettlebell sport, because you're sort of adapting to having a good like engine, good mobility to get through the 10-minute sets, you have to be creative as a coach and find different ways. But also, because it's an endurance sport, technique is a massive thing, because it's about being efficient. And if you're using your shoulders slightly more than what you're allowing the rest of your legs to do, you'll gas out. You know, if you're not dropping under the bells quick enough, if you're not relaxing in the cue positions, you'll gas out. And technical proficiency is absolutely huge. And this is what people struggle with in the beginning days, you know. So unless you work with kids and kids pick it up in like 5 minutes, and you resent them for a while because you're like, I've been practicing this for years and you're just making it look so easy.
It just goes to show, doesn't it? I think, what is it? It's the earlier you start something, the more your body can adapt to it. And and obviously it becomes a lot easier as you go on. But again, it depends on how well you're looking after yourself, doesn't it? And it is that slow building process. So obviously, if I was to go into kettlebells now, or I was to get one of my athletes to go and start doing a kettlebell session, I can guarantee you, if it was a choice between an 8 kilogram and a 12 kilogram, they'd go straight for the 212s, because they'd look at it and think, well, do you know what? I'm not weak. I want the heaviest one. And then they're doing it, and they're like, bloody hell, I can only do like a couple of reps. So it is, like I say, the technique element is, you know, even if it's like with Olympic lifting, when you're going all the way back to just the band, or you're going into it with a broomstick, this is what a lot of people don't realise. You have got to start right down at the bottom to build yourself back up, because as well as the technique, it's the mental strength that obviously you're going to develop as well. So it's really
and, and a big thing for me is I've been doing a lot of research, part of my studying lately in terms of like skill acquisition and motor learning, and as much as we like to think we kind of know it all, whenever you're learning a new skill, it takes time, because whatever you've done previously, you've either picked up new, like, old habits or whatever, and that's saying old habits die hard. And as a kettlebell, as a coach, I've got to look at it and just go, actually, I'm not going to change that habit. So do you know what I need to do? I just need to scale it right back to basics and build a new one, because I'm not going to change somebody's movement patterns. I can try and improve it, but generally speaking, when they get fatigued, they'll just go back to their old habits, because that's what's ingrained. The amount of myelin that is ingrained into that body is there. So you kind of need to break it right down and start a complete fresh. And the mistakes I've kind of made in the past as a coach is I've used cues to try and link it back to what they've done previously. Now, sometimes it does work in terms of getting certain positions, but generally speaking, from a physiological point of view, the sports that they've done, nothing has really replicated kettlebell sport, because it's either been max effort or punching or hitting or playing rugby or any of these sports. There's always some sort of max effort. Whereas kettlebells, it's kind of like you're trying to go max effort without the tension and without applying the physical force, either like squeezing something really tight. You try to exert maximal effort through its elastic qualities and its body weight positioning and getting the body weight transfer. And that's really difficult to do. So from a coach's point of view, skill acquisition and that full learning process is a challenging one, but it's highly rewarding when people get it,
The good thing as well is it's transferable across every sport as well, isn't it? Because I suppose, like with any weightlifting thing that you're doing, and it obviously all depends on the individual athlete's capabilities as well. I suppose when we look at like the endurance element, I suppose this potentially is why CrossFit's becoming quite a big thing over the last few years, because a lot of the stuff that they're doing is of course body weight, and I don't think that every athlete's working to a 1 rep max, particularly on there. It's always a case of like you're going to be lifting 60 kg barbell, or you're going to be doing a single arm kettlebell swing, and it's going to be 18 kilograms, 20 kilograms, and that's across the board. So it's almost a case of you want to become fittest on earth, but you've got to see what your endurance is like for each and every exercise, which is something that I think it's something that a lot of people tend to appreciate, really, is that you don't always have to be lifting the big weights. You don't always have to, it's not a bad thing to be lifting small, but of course obviously the diet element of it has a big part of it also, doesn't it? So
and I think what people need to sometimes realize is when they start any sort of pursuit, or when they come into kettlebell sport, or from my experience, is you've just got to look at what type of athlete you are. And that's sometimes difficult, because there's not a lot of coaches actually sit back and try and find out what type of athlete are they working with. And in the early days, I certainly didn't have a clue that this even existed, but it's trying to understand what type of person you're dealing with in terms of how do they move. So I've learned a lot from a guy, Joel Smith, who wrote Speed Strength, and he's doing some great stuff out there. And I took a lot from his vertical foundations in terms of how people jump, and basically just watching people jump can dictate what type of athlete you have. Now, I know that's kind of subjective, but also when you're doing a movement screen and everything else like that. And I think if you look at CrossFit, and I think CrossFit's great because it's spread across the board, but generally speaking, the people who win it, and I mean, I'm not a CrossFit expert by all means, but people who win it aren't finishing first in every single event.
Exactly.
Sometimes you've got to know where your strengths and weaknesses lie. Now, I know that I'm quite a strong guy. I'm a bit of a strength athlete, you know. I'm not saying I'm a big powerlifter or anything like that, but I can kind of hover around the basic mark, ripper toe, starting strength type strength standards without training too hard on those specific movements. So I can generally hit a 1.5 times body weight front squat fairly competently, give or take 5 kilos. I can hit double body weight deadlift for reps fairly easily, and pull-ups, although that's my weaker part, I can still hit 10 reps with my body weight. So in terms of that, I know that I'm quite a strong athlete, strong guy. So I need to actually recognize that. So my training needs to reflect those qualities, because rather than using a one-size-fits-all approach and saying, right, well, we're all working towards 10 minutes, so we're going to use this same protocol. Now, I've got some guys in my program who are just kind of like work capacity nuts, you know. They've just got wicked engines on them, but they're not particularly strong, i.e. in terms of I can outlift them on the bar and everything else like that, but ask them to do something else and they can just go. They've just got amazing engines on them. But then I've got guys who just look like a grasshopper in terms of like jump and they like bounce off the ceiling kind of thing, and you're like, these guys are just springy guys. So I need to use what they've got, and I need to use their physical qualities and build that up. And that's difficult. It is difficult because it's time consuming, and as a coach, and it'd be fantastic if we could write one program and
it'd be great with it.
Work for everyone, but that's not the nature of the beast. And going back to my sport of kettlebell sport, it makes it difficult in terms of trying to find out what type of athlete you're working towards, because generally speaking, the athlete who comes to you doesn't know. And it's just sometimes a digging through process and finding out, actually, you said you wanted to do this, but do you physically have what it takes to get there to a certain ability, you know? And that it is a difficult skill to do as a coach, you know.
Yeah, so it's definitely to do with the energy systems and identifying. I think, and it's like you say, Steve, the background and what sports they've done previously is going to have a big effect. Because I mean, as coaches, we can retrain energy systems and everything like that. But you know, like you say again, it's something that's going to take time and everything. But it's being able to understand their energy systems, isn't it, and identify how you need to make the tweaks to their training and everything like that. I mean, in terms of so obviously you've got Martin over in the northwest. How does it?
Northeast, mate. Northeast.
Oh, northeast. Oh, no. I know, I'm in the northwest. What's going on? I don't even know where I am. This isolation's got to my head. I don't know where I am. So yeah, talk us through like the process of how you introduce the youth athletes that come into you, and sort of how do you start off with them, and sort of how do you build them on?
Yeah, so I've been very passionate about sport. Hopefully it comes across in this interview, and it is a massive driver for me. And for me to give you the understanding of why I want to drive it so far, I need to take you back a little bit to the beginning of my journey. So I mentioned those two coaches that came over to England, and I tried to have a conversation with one of them, and he spoke no English, so you can imagine how that conversation went. So we got the translator over, and I said, listen, like I absolutely love this sport. I was only like 9 months into it, and I was trying to consume everything. And I just said, I want to come to St. Petersburg in Russia, and I want to come to your gym, and I want to do a 2-week training camp. And we arranged that, and I flew out to St. Petersburg, and I think it was in the May. Yeah, it was the May because it was Victory Day over there. And I went to one of this fantastic gym called Euro Fitness in St. Petersburg, and this had world champion after world champion there. So you had Sergei Richinsky, who was an honoured master of sport, honoured coach of Russia. He was like a real pioneer of the sport. And then you had his student, Denis Vasilyev, who was pound for pound one of the best long cycle lifters, who went on to do 100 reps in clean and jerk with 232s.
Wow.
So, yeah, so, you know, 6,400 kilograms in 10 minutes, you know. The guy's just an absolute monster, but one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet. You also had Alexander Kostov, who was champion of Russia, world champion, Alexandra Vasilyeva, and the list goes on. All of these great guys. But what I noticed in one of the group sessions that Kostov used to run was just the variety of people. You're talking, you had just women who were trying to keep fit, but then you had kids who were 16 coming in and joining in with the session. It had such a wide variety, and they're all at different stages. And it was mainly kind of looking at the teens and going, wow, these guys are picking up a sport and a skill that is just going to really help them just get fitter, stronger. Because I had appreciation of the sport, and I think sometimes that's where it falls down. People don't quite appreciate how difficult it is. And I was looking at these guys, and they were just not phased and everything else like that. It was kind of just incredible to see. And you see a lot more youths coming onto the scene. And ever since then, I've kind of realised, well, actually, this is just a cracking sport, and especially in this generation we are now. So, for example, we know there's a big rise of ACL injuries and stuff like that, and there's a lot more specialisation in sport at a younger age. I mean, I hear stories of football academies picking people up at like 7 and 6 years old and stuff, and it's just like, what is going on? Whereas, so although kids groups are getting younger and younger in certain sports, and I know they're all trying to build the skill and the fun and everything else as well, but because kids aren't generally going out and playing in playgrounds, and PE in the English school system certainly isn't built around physical education anymore. It's built about sports curriculum. Yeah. So for one term they'll play football, the next term they'll do athletics, the next term they'll do badminton. That's just the curriculum they've took down. So in terms of physical education, in terms of how to do good quality squats, how to do lunges, how to kind of lift a weird object, and all of just work capacity and stuff, you know.
It's because we're not allowed to experience. Kids aren't allowed to experience life, are they? Because of all these rules and regulations, and health and safety's sort of gone a bit loopy, hasn't it?
Do you know what? I think a few years ago, I probably would agree there, but I think the whole social landscape now is so complex. It's so difficult to put. I mean, the amount of green spaces there is available for kids these days is getting less and less. You know, you think back to every field that you probably played on as a kid, and I know I used to play on as a kid. I couldn't take my daughter there because there's a housing estate there. Do you know? So green spaces are coming down, accessibility, and actually, yes, kids want to spend a bit more time in front of the TV and on electrical products and stuff. But I think it's because of the PE curriculum is you either do this sport and you're either good at it or you're not good at it.
Yeah, that's it.
You're either the top goal scorer, the fastest in the class, the best goalkeeper, you know, the best tennis player, or what. Everything's win and lose, you know. Whereas the studies show time and time again, to keep kids in a sport, there's got to be enjoyment in there, and the enjoyment's got to come from being task orientated, not ego orientated. So
Yeah.
it's not win and lose. It's about mastering a skill and a task and building on that. And so this is where the kettlebells has come in, because we've got a lot of kids who come to the classes, and mum and dad are kind of like, they've tried football, they've tried this, they've tried gymnastics, they've tried everything under the sun. I know they need to do something to be physically active, but I cannot find the sport for them. And our sessions are structured on, similar to the UK athletics model of run, jump and throw. So we teach the kids how to jump, they throw, they don't throw kettlebells about, they throw medicine balls and stuff like that. We teach them running and everything else. And then kettlebells is the tool that we use to get them in, you know. So we teach them the fundamental skills, but then with the kettlebell stuff, they're getting an experience of coordination, endurance, and work capacity. Now, if we can get those kids into moving consistently on a regular basis for durations of time, they're getting their work capacity in there. So if they go and play football, if they go and play any sports or whatever it may be, the chances of injury start to reduce down a little bit, because they've got the work capacity. They're not just becoming specialized, you know. One of my mentors that helped me in the early days was, you've got to become a kind of a specialist generalist, you know. And I think that's where athletes have got to be, and especially with the juniors. So with our kettlebell training, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to teach the kids good skills, good movement skills, but also allow them to be good at a lot of different physical qualities, you know. And some of the kids then want to sort of take that further and start progressing through our pathway. So we've got a ranking system within the gym that's modeled off the Russian Master of Sports pathway. And we adapt it. So basically the kids will try and perform a certain amount of reps in 3 minutes time. And then once they can do that, they can then move on to the slightly heavier weight. And when I'm talking about weight, then they're using 2 kilogram weights, 4 kilograms, 6 kilogram, 8. They're going up in 2 kilogram increments. So basically, once they can perform 3 minutes, then they'll move on to 5-minute type sets. And then once they can do that, then they can move up to the weight and go 3 minutes, 5 minutes, then possibly 7 minutes. And they've got a nice step procedure which makes sure that they can tick the boxes. But first and foremost, before they can start doing any of those physical tests, they've got to be able to demonstrate and explain the technical points that they're trying to get into. So we've got this system in place which is allowing the kids, for one, they can see their development, which is kind of the little bit of a dangly carrot and the reward system. But by breaking it down bit by bit, we can make the kids task orientated. And it's not, did you do 5 minutes and do 100 reps? Or did you not? It's not resting on the win or lose. I've achieved it or you didn't. It's our coaching process is right. Technique of the week. This is what we want you to try and focus on. And then once they can start focusing on mastering that skill, we can start to look at the types of goals that they've got, and they start to become more intrinsic based goals, and they actually build that awareness. And because they get the awareness, then other skills that they perform, when it becomes more complex, they've got a really good understanding of it, you know. And we find that in the early days it's difficult because they're not used to this style of coaching, or not the ones that have come into our club, certainly. But once they get it, once they start rolling, man, these kids just skyrocket and just develop and have just turned into absolute mini athlete machines sort of thing, you know. And it's just fantastic to see, you know.
It's what you want as well, isn't it? And because if they're making, you know, the things, that key elements there, the challenges of the week so they've got that time to master the technique. They're not under any pressure, are they? It's just, you know, they take their time, as long as they've sort of got 80% of the way there or not even that, by the end of the week. It's great, because I suppose it's it's encouraging them as well, isn't it, to practice away from the coaching session. So if they're not quite there come Friday, Saturday, Sunday, they can go away and say, right, I need to spend another 5-10 minutes doing my snatch, for example, or I need to do something else. And it's a great way of doing it. And I think that's key. And I mean, in terms of the curriculum and everything, I certainly do think that we would benefit, the curriculum would benefit a lot more from doing more strength-based activities, because it's all great, well and good with football and rugby, but kids, I mean, in my experiences in schools, a lot of the kids are getting bored with it now, especially with there being a lot more mixed race, mixed gender, and that's having a bit of an effect as well. So it would be nice to just, have an after school club, or maybe have in PE, they split it in two. One group goes outside and does cycling, for example. The other group sits in and does some form of kettlebells or weightlifting. I think that'll be better in terms of improving their strength and their health in the long run, than just give them a basketball, for example, and bounce a basketball and throw hoops for a bit.
And because what you've got to think of is kids' attention spans now. No, I haven't read the papers on this, so I might be completely wrong. But if you watch any TV program now or anything on YouTube, it generally starts with one clip and then changes to another every 2 seconds or so. If you watch any sort of film, the shot doesn't stay in one position for any long duration of time, really. You think about every film program you've ever watched. So people's attention spans is a lot different. But with the kids, is because of there seems to be a lot more anxiety around that now. I don't know if this is just because we're more aware of anxiety. So everybody loves a label, right? Everybody wants to be classed as, okay, well, I'm kind of the middle run. Nobody wants to be classed as average. So they're either got something wrong with them, or if mum and dad are anxious, the kid becomes anxious. The kid's either the best or he's the worst, or whatever it may be. So everybody loves a label, right? But we can sort of just try and manipulate that a little bit and try and make sure that no matter what, we can start to shed these labels. Because if you've been assigned a label that is possibly going to hold you back later in life, so if you've got anxiety issues, that might be the truth, but actually if you accept that as a label, then it's always going to be at the front of your mind. And what I've found with kettlebells is, because they're stood in one spot and they're just lifting, automatically that takes the pressure off of people are looking at me and they're judging me. So that takes away that one. The second one is it's given them something to work towards. They feel the difficulty during the session. They feel it during the set. So they feel that, wow, I've just done that.
Yeah.
They get that instant feedback of, wow, I worked really hard and I didn't stop and I kept on going for that full time. They get that appreciation. So and then all of a sudden it just drops out of, well, if I can do that, what else can I do?
This is
the conversations I've had with parents that have gone, I can't believe it. Like 4 weeks of the kettlebell course that they've done they're completely different, because they're approaching things in a different way. They're using the kettlebells and the setup that we've got in the gym, and they're approaching their schoolwork in the same way, which is just fantastic. I mean, I got a fantastic letter from a parent, and it was all about parents' evening, and the teacher said, have they taken up a sport or something? Like, yeah. So they've just started doing this, which it was like, we can just tell, because how they approach their English work now, everything's got a specific start. Yeah. Then it's got like a little bit of a middle bit, which they're starting to play around with it, and they're approaching everything like they would their training.
There's a nice structure, isn't there?
Yeah. For me as a coach, like, I know not all of the kids who come through my club are, one, going to enjoy it, but two, they're not going to go on to be international kettlebell athletes. I know that. And to be honest with you, I don't really want, that's not my goal. My goal is for any child that comes into our program to get physically fit, to learn some new skills which they're going to continue later in life. But two, if we can help them become more confident and actually allow them to express themselves and develop in a way where they have an understanding of what's right, what's wrong in terms of discipline and everything else like that, and give them that focus, then we know that that's going to carry on in different areas of their life. And if we can impart that knowledge and those skills, which are vital skills for me, then I know I'm doing my job as a coach. And if some of them, and we've got 4 of them now who are on the England team as juniors, if some of them go down that route, absolutely amazing. If some don't, that's not a problem. My goal is to use kettlebell sport to allow kids to get into a sport where they possibly didn't know existed, but also for those kids who don't like football, don't like this, but they want to be doing something. We want to bridge that gap, and give them an outlet where they can do that.
Yeah, and it's fantastic being able to have those type of athletes within the environment as well, because ultimately you're demonstrating that this is the possibilities, and then they utilize these other young athletes as role models. So ultimately, they become stronger in terms of building the relationships. The more advanced athletes going to become more. They're going to develop the leadership skills because they're going to want to take them under their wing, and then their confidence is going to go through the roof. This sounds absolutely brilliant. So, for those guys that want to find out a bit more about getting into kettlebell training, where can they find a bit more information out about it?
So basically, if they want to reach out, they reach out either to me directly. So find me on Facebook at Ste Gordon, or follow my page at TUNOVA. So that's TU_NOVA kettlebell training, or go to the website, which is tu-nova.com. And also I've got plenty of YouTube videos and how-to videos on TUNOVA Fitness on YouTube as well. So that's kind of the key areas to find out a little bit more, or reach out to me directly.
Sounds great. I think we could sort of start to round the podcast up. We could speak. I think we could speak all day, because it's really interesting to find out a bit more about the sport and the impact it's having on the fact that it's not just becoming an athlete. It's about becoming the all-round person and finding your guide and discovering yourself. But no, it's been great. But Ste, I really appreciate your time today, buddy. Have you got any last bits of advice for the listeners?
Guys, just go into every single training session you're doing just trying to leave a little bit better. Just go in with trying to improve one specific thing. Go in with one specific goal each and every session. And just carry that ethos into everything you do in life, and you won't go too far wrong. So like we say to the kids, I can, I will, and I must, and you be able to achieve anything you put your mind to.
Some great advice there, Ste. Much appreciate your time, buddy. Have a great rest of the day.
You too, pal. Cheers, mate.
Happy days. Cheers for that, buddy.